And we're live.
All right.
So sorry about that last one. We didn't realize that the
Audio was all screwed up.
yeah, pretty much the audio was all jacked up. But we went ahead, saw that, fixed it, and said, well, you know what? We can either go ahead and record the whole thing again, or we can go ahead and put a whole another podcast out there. And I think we're gonna go ahead and put a whole another podcast out there.
Yeah. We said screw. Trying to redo it or whatever. We'll just put a whole nother one out.
Yeah.
Kind of continue on where we were at. Actually.
Yeah, might as well. So
yeah.
We'll make this one another 30-minute podcast.
All right. So we were talking about
data.
Data. Yes, we're talking about data and your data in particular.
My data or your data or their data.
So data, everybody wants data because data would be the best way to market your anything to everything. Whoever, and you would get the biggest. What is it like?
What?
Return or whatever? You get the biggest return.
Yeah.
When you can market like that. So, what are your ideas on data collecting?
It's very. What's the word I'm looking for? It starts with an M.
So
misunderstood, I guess you can say, in the way it's collected and in the way it's used. It's very misunderstood. It always seems as if everyone portrays data collection as bad.
So right now in our country, everything about anything in regards to data collecting is bad. Mm-hmm. It was just recently put out that Mark Zuckerberg feels that data collecting is bad. So, how do you feel about that?
I feel as if people don't understand what data collecting is and what your data means.
Why do you think they feel like it's bad?
They feel they feel like if it's bad because they're not getting anything out of it. They're giving away their information and they're not receiving anything. And I understand, yeah, that is bad when you're providing a service and you're not being paid for it, essentially. However, there is an underlying gray area. And that gray area is that you can make money off of this, but people just don't want to give their data anymore. That's what the argument's turned into. We don't give them any more data.
So how would you make money off of your data?
There is a individual in California, and I forget his name, but basically he went to their Supreme Court or a court over there in California and basically says, hey, we need to make sure that we can turn off our data when we don't want to collect it, and that any data they do collect, they being big tech or any kind of business, gives us some kind of fund, essentially, some kind of rebate. Saying,
so then
hey,
we need to make a law that would enact this to make it possible.
Yeah, definitely.
So every time that you're searching something, putting in whatever information, and they're collecting these things about you, you'd be okay as long as they kick you back a little something.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. Do you think that's the problem with the misunderstanding right now? Is that people just feel, for the most part, that they're like they're kind of being taken advantage of in some sense?
Yes, and in this day and age, it's very hard because, again, we are so divided. We're at a 50-50 split, and a lot of people just do not trust the government anymore. And so everyone thinks, hey, these phones are listening into our conversations. They're looking up stuff that I talked about, and there is another whole argument about, security and all that other stuff in terms of phones. However, it's not necessarily that. So the way I describe data is that, and this is the part that people don't understand because it's a real hard concept, is that data, the way you look it up, is basically a signal, right? If you want to think about it in terms of your house is this dome. And then in this dome, you can go ahead and you can send information in and you can send information out. So essentially, if you look something up, or someone in your family or someone in your basically on your Wi-Fi is looking something up. It's sent into this dome, and then it goes ahead and realizes someone somewhere realizes, hey, they're starting to look up this information. Let's just start spamming them advertisements, and then everyone in their house gets that same information. Perfect example. One day I looked up the iPhone 11. Again, if you watch another podcast, I'm not super excited about the iPhone 11. However, you started to get advertisements for that.
Right. Yeah. I was wondering how all of a sudden all of these advertisements were coming up with stuff that I know we were discussing, but I necessarily wasn't searching. And I was like, how the heck is that? And I mean, almost, instantly, as soon as you were searching that, all my online ads would switch up to that product.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's interesting. It's
Yeah.
interesting that
It's
how
a
that
good way
happens.
to, and it's a good way to keep eye on what people are kind of looking for in your household too. And so it works in that sense that you understand what people in your household are looking for. For example, if you have kids and you start seeing these kind of ads for toys and stuff like that, you can get an idea that, hey, these kids want these toys. Like, hey, I've been getting constant advertisement for drones.
Mm-hmm.
Someone in my house wants a drone.
Mm-hmm.
Simple as that. To take it a step further,
So, well, that's you're putting a lot of good examples. So why are people so afraid of this? I think it's odd. People think it's odd that that all of a sudden you look up a product and then you just get slammed with all this advertisement. It seems like you're at a disadvantage.
yeah, and that's what I was going to lead up to was that to take it a step further is that you look anything up once. It doesn't
Mm-hmm.
matter what it is. It could be a drone. It could be a
Yeah,
athletic shoes or
anything. Right,
anything.
right,
Uh, and then you start getting a bunch of ads
right.
everywhere you go. And essentially, these ads are basically telling you, hey, go buy this.
Mm-hmm.
You need this.
Yeah.
Go buy it. Go buy it. Go buy it. And eventually, after a while, you do. You do go buy
Mm-hmm.
it. Um, but, a lot of times those dumb buys, what I call impulse buys,
Mm-hmm.
it's just really dumb stuff. And unfortunately, that's the downside of this whole data
Mm-hmm.
collecting thing.
But I mean, it's I think it's a lot deeper than that when you go away from just products and you think about ideas because you haven't paid too much attention, but in addition to just regular ads from big corporations, you get a bunch of independent organizations, outlets, or whatever that are targeted towards your demographics. And they can be whatever. For instance, I'm getting stuff that's like, in relation to being Latino. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
Yeah.
Or because I'm into hip hop, you get these hip hop ads and stuff
Yeah.
like that. So again, those aren't that um,
Well, you could even.
they're not that targeting or whatever. Like they're not very misleading because it's stuff that I'm into. But you start finding articles, you start finding a lot of this talk of where they start to sway you. And where I'm getting at is like, then you start getting into the politics and ideas and philosophies of how people are trying to sway your beliefs.
Yeah. I was going to say, harmless example is when you're on YouTube and you are listening to music and you basically put it on a playlist of an artist you like, and then you start getting every rotation you get a new artist that you've never heard before, and you get into that.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's a harmless example, right?
Right.
And that's kind of where the data collection goes. um, However, the downside of that is that they are basically pushing whatever the data is, they're pushing what's getting seen and shown.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, uh, a very good example would be and then we're just gonna scrape on this, but basically the hip hop industry, the rap industry.
Mm-hmm.
Before, in the '90s, it was kind of like a little bit more profound and lyrical, and now you have people like the Catch Me Outside, How About That Girl rapping, and her rap is just like, I don't know how to describe it. I like it because it's dumb and I like it, but at the same time I'm like, this is not propelling this industry any further. I mean, it's just very much copy and paste at this point. Um, and that's the downside of data collecting, is that essentially these people see what's trending and what's popular, and they just push those couple ideas out there. And if you wanted to get on a global scale, on a higher kind of scale, the global market is very, very interesting to look at. If you really wanted to compare it, it'd pretty much be between us here in the US and China, and just the advancements they're making and the advancements we're making. And data collection can go further than just music, entertainment, industry, retail. They're getting to the point to where they're starting to go into other fields, like medical fields. And so it's real weird if you've been keeping up with the news and kind of following these other little outlets from both China and the US. But basically, since we've been putting tariffs on them, it comes down to that we are starting to see, or no, sorry, they are starting to see an increase in medical businesses from the US coming to China. And it's very weird. And then I saw another outlet that's basically describing breast cancer and how you can use this data collection, this recognition system, basically, if you want to call that, or really it's face recognition system, and we'll get into that here in a bit. But it goes to looking at people who've had breast cancer and seeing the anomalies that they had, and going to someone who developed cancer and someone who didn't develop cancer, and they're running thousands of images by this thing every day
with facial recognition.
Well, it's the same kind of recognition.
Oh,
and so we'll get back
using,
to that.
Okay,
And
so they're using that kind of technology to process a lot of images.
Yes, basically, if you want to come down to it, it's a recognition system, and they're using it to look at these X-rays of these people who developed cancer, breast cancer, and they're able to see it and understand that, hey, we can catch this early on, and or hey, this person didn't need the surgery, but they still got the surgery done, and it's super expensive, and we could have saved them lots of money. And it's pretty phenomenal the way things are going right now. And you know, that's a good example of it.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, that is a good example. Unfortunately, we're subjected to a lot of this craziness right now. We're trying to figure out how this data collection is useful in a better way, than just trying to push some product or political ideas or something like that.
Yeah. But however, a lot of it, going back to this face recognition thing, can be used for bad. Some of the extreme examples that we're starting to see with this technology is in China, unfortunately. And let me see. You basically have two situations that they're kind of going into right now. First situation is that if you've ever seen the show Black Mirror on Netflix, so to run this by you, they have a show to where everyone has I would like to call it a morality score. And so the lower your score, the more kind of like...
Oh, yeah, okay, I know what you're talking about. Yeah, they were calling it a social score.
Yeah, it's a social score.
Yeah. So I know what you're getting at.
Yeah, so higher score you have, the better person
so I know
you are.
what you're getting at then.
Yeah, it's like a credit score.
Basically, in China, they have stuff... I don't know, how implemented is that stuff?
It's not right now. They're in the trial periods, and so...
then interesting. This is where people get scared, because ultimately what we're describing is police state. Right? Police state.
It's not just happening in China. It is going to happen here in America too. Yeah. It's going to happen everywhere.
Right. So then this is the scary part for everybody. So even though you have technology that can help in medicine, dramatically, and that is a very good thing, the downside that people see, and it's just who you are and how you perceive this. For me, I could foresee this a long time ago, now it seems like it's becoming a reality. For other people who don't like this, I don't know. I guess for a long time they just really tried to go against the grain and not side with this. But how do you not? I mean, how do you not when you have this day and age? You pretty much have a big screen TV in your living room, and you have a smartphone. You know, I
Yeah.
don't know how many people don't have those two items and still feel like this,
Yeah.
like we're not going forward with
Yeah.
technology.
It
But yeah, basically, you know, you're turning into um, uh, a world where all this technology, you know, we have cameras everywhere. How many freaking cameras do you have? You know, and when you have a camera everywhere, all you're able to do is see everything that's happening, and you know, up to the minute, you know,
yeah.
at time. And so with that happening, like right now, so I guess ultimately we said it right. Police state. That's what we're talking about. A police state, and what it is to have a social score. Right now, we're not there yet, but a good example of that being played out is the Ring doorbell system. If you have a Ring doorbell system, you automatically agree to be in a network with the local PD. And so, if anything happens and you have a Ring doorbell, they have access to that
Mm-hmm.
footage,
Mm-hmm.
and that's a perfect example. And people see it a lot of times where it's good, it works, you know, and like something crazy bizarre happened. The only thing that caught it was this Ring doorbell, and they're able to use those details to, you know, follow up on something that bad that was occurring.
Yeah.
But the downside is, you know, you take that further and you have, you know, those cameras and, you know, cameras that are put up in businesses to just, you know, local street cameras to, you know, when 5G rolls out, is you know, the tower going to be connected to a camera, and you know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah,
more and
and
more
it
cameras just being out
these
that
facial
get rolling
recognition
out.
systems are
Right.
pretty spot on here
Yeah.
in China. What they're trying to do essentially, or what they are doing, and they're pretty accurate, is that they can look at you, tell who you are, and so far they can pretty much pinpoint your age, you know, within a
Mm-hmm.
year or two.
Yeah.
And it is phenomenal.
Right.
Essentially, they're getting to the point to where their vending machines are using facial recognition, and it's getting so crazy that they can track you wherever you want or wherever you are.
Mm-hmm.
And right now, again, going back to these social scores, they're kind of putting in this or implementing these social scores. And like I said, the higher your score, the better you are. The lower score, the worse you are. And obviously, if you're good, you get discounts on airfare, travel, whatever. Your lower score, you basically can't leave your city or something like that. And that's the downside. Where we're seeing this really is the right now there is a group of Muslims that are in China or relatively close to China. I can't remember where exactly. And they're protesting right now, saying that their rights are being violated. And what's happening is that the Chinese government can go ahead and see these people, these individuals, track them down, and then send them to these internment camps to go undergo reevaluation.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's pretty scary in that sense, knowing that the government can take you everywhere,
Mm-hmm.
anywhere, and follow you everywhere and everything you do. Um, but at the same time, you know, you're seeing places like Google set up one of these towns built on AI in Canada, you know, so it's not that far from us.
So I guess a perfect example is, you know, when people think about this and you say, "Oh my God, they could just take you and, you know, nobody would know, you know, they can target people or whatever." That is true. That is very true, and that's why there's people that, you know, do not want this kind of technology being rolled out, or if it does roll out, who's in control, who's in charge, how's it, you know, being used and all and whatnot. But another example is, I don't even know if we talked about this or what. I don't know, but I remember you and I talking about it um, uh, just off record and discussing one of these school shootings that just occurred. I can't even remember which one it was, but it was in California.
It
And
wasn't a school, I think.
it
Oh
was a
no, it
school.
was a
It
school.
was a school, and it was like a young kid, like a ninth grader or something. It was at a high school, and I actually was here and I saw it being played out on the news, in pretty much real time, and it was interesting to hear. It was pretty it was pretty
That the
bizarre.
police, FBI, and
So
a lot of these people were
so
within minutes, right?
so the gist of it is that it was so there's a lot of craziness, going on. Yes, the biggest highlights were that in 1 minute the cops were there. Unfortunately, I think still 5 kids. I mean, somewhere around there, about a handful of kids still died. So, getting just kind of getting at that. Um, ha, I guess before we even get to that, so in 1 minute the cops got there, 5 kids still died. All of the coverage was just so dramatic. The shooter, who they say the shooter, who they're claiming, who they're calling with this vocabulary, shooter, he's a freaking kid. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? He's a kid. And yes, he ranks terror, and I understand. I mean, he did kill five uh
Other kids.
yeah, 5 kids. The parents didn't see their kids. And yeah, I mean, it put everybody in this extreme mode of shock, and there was all kinds of agencies, all kinds of vehicles. The school was in a neighborhood, so there was just people everywhere, and the only thing you can think is, how do you stop something like this if we're not going to take guns away? Or even if you do take guns away, and something, the kid gets a hold of a knife or whatever, it's like you're talking about this facial recognition that could ultimately spot out this type of behavior, and or try to stop it as soon as possible.
Yeah, and
Or
then
and if it doesn't, the worst case would be right then and there, right
yeah,
before, a second
and
before it happens. So.
what we're starting to see is the rise of, or sorry, the decrease of time these first responders have in these mass shootings. I
Mm-hmm.
think one of the last ones I saw was that the officers were there with, and it was a different situation. I think no one got hurt other than the kid, and he wasn't, it wasn't fatal.
Mm-hmm.
And essentially, these police officers were there within minutes,
Mm-hmm.
and one officer took a shot at another one of these kids,
Yeah.
and it's almost like they are. I don't want to say these cops are starting to use this technology to go ahead and spy on people, but they are starting to see something going on for them to be there that fast, and now we're
Well,
starting to
there's a
see
lot of
them.
drills and everything. There's a lot going on to the topic. I don't want to go too deep into school shootings and
Yeah,
all that, because we're talking about data collection. But this is just an example of how you could get people to get on board with data collection, because they have to deal with the tragedy of losing their kid at school because of another kid that brought a gun. It's as simple as that. But in the media, like I said, it gets played out as a really big, huge, dramatic scene. And how do you combat that? You have all this technology. Why not implement it? You're going to have a lot of people that are going to get behind that. You know, and that's just, again, like, just being able to foresee, like, this is the direction to go in, instead of saying, like, no, you're not going to put cameras everywhere, and be able to make these advancements and whatnot. But
yeah,
yeah, data collection is very, very interesting as well. So
yeah, yeah. It's a, it is what you make it.
yeah, so
You know,
next time when you're putting in all your info and this and that, whatever, and you think it's you're at a disadvantage, maybe you just start looking at your lawmakers to figure out how you can get an advantage, giving up all your data,
yeah,
if these companies are going to use it, because that's ultimately where you're going to. Is like we were talking. Um, if any company had that much more information, they could just make way more better decisions that are much more profitable.
yeah.
So
I mean, that's what I always tell people. You're only worth as much as this. You know, you're only worth as much as you search.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
But
Yep.
yeah, I think that's it.
Alrighty then. Till next time.
See ya.